time to begin. So I declare the Audit, Risk and Finance meeting ARF 25/1 open and welcome everyone present. And as you know, this is live streamed. I think Anne is joining us on Zoom or has joined us on Zoom. So welcome, Anne. I think everybody else is here. So no apologies. All right, settle the spirit, clear the mind, prepare the body to achieve what needs to be achieved. Yes. And we are under the pump this morning, people, because of the local government representation review people. Chambers is going to be available for them at 12 o'clock. So please no deviations or distractions about dog fees, dog parks, speed limits, median barriers, drain cleaning, mowing, or State Highway 2 or State Highway 29. Thank you. So nothing left to talk about. Okay, there are no late items. Are there any declarations of interest that we need to note? There being none. All right, there's no public forum, no presentation, so we're into our first report on page 7. And it's over to Darren. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you. So it's been really a good quarter for the people team and the health and safety team. Very, very busy. We've got a number of projects going on, internal change projects, HRIS system implementation, which is progressing really well. Leadership development initiatives going along good as well. We're about to launch into that. But also pleasingly, obviously, you can see some key insights for the period with our key statistics as we track those. Of note, turnover is decreasing, continues to decrease, so that's a great trend for us. Absenteeism rate has decreased significantly. That's a huge result. I don't know what we can put that one down to. We're just going through a good patch of obviously everyone's keeping well and healthy at this stage, so that's pleasing as well. There was a slight increase over which is quite typical in the headcount over the period, as we have a number of the temporary summer roles over the Christmas period, but we're already back down to approximately 330 people now at this time. Are there any key questions with regards to the report?
Rodney, obviously we're looking to save money at the moment,
yes.
Clear that deficit.
Yep.
So we're holding vacancies open. Has that caused any strains in the organisation?
Well, we're constantly monitoring those kinds of changes within the organisation and looking at how we can best optimise it. I'm probably a really good example of that at the moment. I've stepped into the temporary management of the corporate and performance and partnership team. So we're looking to look at how we can optimise that. You know, we've got good support in place for those areas that we look to optimise as best we can. So, you know, we've got to make really good decisions. The executive leadership team have very good cadence around reviewing vacancies every week. And each GM brings to the table their resource considerations. And we have a good discussion about that, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. And the good thing is that we are tracking along and making some good savings as a result of that strategy.
I guess the flip side is there a way to make some of these savings permanent? And I don't mean putting more strain on the staff. Sometimes you just have to stop doing some stuff, right? You don't want to overwork people, but maybe some of the work can be stopped. And so hopefully it also looking at it that way as well.
Yep, and that's an absolutely a really important lens that the executive team put over the organisation in terms of what can we stop, what can we do in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, constantly making sure that we're focused on those key deliverables and priorities and the things that we need to bring to you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I did know that the total employees increased from 329 to 342.
Yes.
Can you just explain why that was? I thought we had a bit of a soft hiring freeze at the moment, so perhaps you can explain why that did increase.
Yeah, so those we had 13 temporary fixed term roles, which were quite short term, and they support us through that summer period with additional roles such as summer ambassadors and just some works that typically increase over that summer period. And most of those short-term temporary positions have finished now. So if we're reporting for the current period, you'll see that number is reduced to about 330 again already.
Thank you.
Councillor Murray Benj.
I always feel as though I've got to apologise for asking a question, Sue, but I'll be quite quick.
We'll judge that afterwards.
Within your corporate group, do you ever assess as to how decisions are made and whether you've got staff going off on tangents and not focusing on the core issues? How do you assess that? Or do you first assess it? And does that happen very often?
Oh, look, it's really important. Obviously, our people leaders play a key role in ensuring that the activities that our people are focused on are the ones that are contributing the most value to the organisation and are aligned to delivering our strategic priorities in those areas. Obviously, that's the key focus for the executive leadership team. And I can give you an example. I report into Adele. And I'm very clear about what I need to be focused on to deliver those outcomes. And likewise, it's certainly my role to be ensuring that my team's contributing to those activities. So it's one of those things you do need to always constantly monitor and measure. And if priorities do change, and from time to time they do, with we talk about the significance of reform, which is coming down the pipeline. Sometimes we have to adapt, we have to reprioritise, and we have to shift our resources to respond to those. And that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment, is the level of reform coming through. Local water's done well as a key one for us. While we've got a full work program at the moment in the background, we are planning obviously quite carefully for a shift in focus to ensure that we can meet those deadlines around that reform.
Councillor Cox.
Don't want to dig into this too much, but the gender pay gap, and having worked in a corporate as well, I understand a lot of the reasons there is that gap is because often women don't apply for jobs that perhaps pay more or do different hours, reduced hours. But just at high level, what do you think is the reason for the gap?
We're starting to dive into this a little bit more. We're at a very early stages of probably maturity around understanding what the key drivers are for the organisation here. So we're starting to crunch some numbers and try and work that out. As a whole, we have obviously quite a number of services which are in our community facing roles, libraries and things like that. There is a tendency for more women to be in those positions, and there is a bit of an alignment with some of those front facing customer roles tend to be on the lower pay bands within the organisation. So we're starting to try and understand that a little bit better, but I imagine that's one of the elements which are contributing to it as well.
You'll probably struggle to ever understand women.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, just a quick question on page 19 under audit and review, talking about the proactive checks and inspections involved. I just see a very stratospheric number there, 529% increase, which is great to see. Is anything of value being learned with that significant amount of information coming in?
Yeah, look, it's the learning is that the key insight for that is that we are trying to move into a really proactive space around our health and safety systems and frameworks. And these safety observations, while they might not present any kind of significant change in the short term, the key is that they could prevent something significant from happening. And that behaviour is the kind of behaviour that we want to continue to drive within the organisation. And it's not something that we've particularly well supported from a reporting perspective previously. So in terms of that whole shift, in terms of moving to that more proactive rather than reactive health and safety focus, these types of things are relatively new for us. Hence, you're moving from a low baseline to actually getting a significant number of reports and proactive reports through, which is good.
So I suppose we're just trying to understand it's going to require additional work of staff to do all these things. Is it actually producing something of value at this point?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question, and that's something that I'll take back to Clint and we'll have a chat about it. For me, this falls in the area. Some of the basic things is actually just a pre-vehicle inspection before you jump in and drive off. You know, a positive outcome of that would be that you might identify a vehicle that is not fit for purpose at that time before you get in it. That would be a big win. So if you're looking at those types of things, and those proactive checks are really, really important for us as we start to exercise our due diligence around our work sites and things like that as well. We want to start reporting on that a lot more.
Just looking forward, if you step back from the noise, is there anything that's keeping you up at night looking forward?
Look, I don't think so at the moment. Look, I think we're doing a really solid job, right? There's certainly room for improvement, but we are doing a solid job. We've got a really healthy level of knowledge of what good looks like at our executive leadership team, which filters down to the organisation. We have a number of foundation systems and practices and frameworks which are in place, which are well understood and used. But we certainly would like to continue to push the dial in a few areas. And obviously, one of the key things within the report this quarter was the infrastructure, health and safety systems framework audit and review, which resulted in what we call a maturity level of systemic, which is basically right in the middle. It means that we're doing a solid job. We're not in this reactive space, but we're not necessarily in this fully proactive space where we're actually doing everything the way that we'd want to do it. And I'm sure the maturity across the organisation will shift a little bit differently. You know, it's a great result for infrastructure because you know we're focusing there because it's the highest risk for our business, and so achieve that rating is quite good. The key recommendations came out of that. Were actually no surprise to us. They were actually forming part of the foundation of our 2024 strategy, and we'll continue to work in those spaces. So we've got proactive works going on in those areas now. So I think the key is that we are aware of what good looks like. We've got good people in the organisation to support that. It's all about getting a little bit better.
Thank you. And our last question from Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. I have a couple. One, actually, I'll just mention is there's a spelling error or something, or a choice of word there on page 19, and you've got distinguish the fire by smothering it. I think they mean extinguish. But that's mine. Don't get me wrong. It's just nice for me to pick up an error with my spelling. Well, there's two or three other things. One is on page 16, and we have the maturity scale. That seems pretty good. No, we're in a good space. Is there a driving, I mean, naturally we want to be better, but is this something that is going to be driven to go higher, or is it something as long as we keep within that band, we are safe and we quietly work towards it? Going up the scale?
Oh, no, we're certainly being proactive. We want to drive it higher. We want to take our maturity to that proactive level. Certainly do. We want to implement interventions to support that. So always focused on that. Absolutely.
Okay. And the other question I have really, as Councillor Cox had got my other one, but are we required to report on ethnicity?
Are we required to report on ethnicity?
Yeah.
We do report on ethnicity.
Are we required to? It just is creating like a difference. We've got ethnicity there in numbers of people, and I just felt isn't it about our staff and their capabilities and whether they be whatever? That was all. So I just don't know where that comes into a quality situation.
Oh, I'm not sure it does come into a quality situation. We're just really interested to understand our workforce, the diversity that's in play. From my perspective, it's really useful information for us just as a people team to understand.
Thank you. Sorry, I skipped right over the Deputy Mayor. I do apologise.
No problem. Thank you. I just wanted to ask,
about, there's an item on a table on page 20, and it refers to aggressive interactions, which appear to have peaked about a year ago and are declining, but it's still quite a significant number. And I was concerned if you could, or interested if you could provide a bit more context around that, in particular as to whether there are any common themes causing that, and are you comfortable that staff are adequately prepared to cope with those situations?
Yeah, it is one of our critical risks that we're really well aware of, and we do monitor that really closely. And look, it's probably the pleasing thing to see is that, pleasing is probably not the right word, is that we've identified these are our top critical risks, and the majority of our incidents are being reported against those. And with those critical risks, is that's where we spend the most time reviewing really, really closely what the level of risk is, what the controls that we have in to mitigate that, and are we comfortable with performing in those areas in terms of keeping our people safe and well. And the way that we do that is we do check in regularly with our people to understand if they do feel like they are capable and competent to deal with those situations. And for the most, they are. And so that means that the controls and the mitigants that we are putting in place are working well. We continue to monitor very, very closely, and with that critical risk being there, is that we review that on a very regular cadence. At a minimum, we're reviewing that every year, and if not, every kind of 6 months.
Just following on from Councillor Sol's question, do we have in council a DEI hiring policy?
And no, we don't have an intentional hiring policy in that space.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I was intrigued about the monthly speed score trend, the deep dive into driver behaviour. Can you clarify whether staff have their vehicles monitored for speed? I thought they had been in the past and it was discontinued, but I appreciate an update on that.
Yeah, well, our vehicles are GPS, so by default we can monitor them for speed.
But do they get? Because I know there was a feeling that being having oversight from their manager, or every time they broke the speed limit was kind of quite oppressive for some staff members. And I was wondering how that is.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and again, it's just the recent review of that critical risk, because driving vehicles is actually one of the other 4 critical risks in that space too. So when we're doing those reviews, we're always asking ourselves, is there anything else that we could be doing to improve safety within those spaces? And so we do look at that data now, and we report collectively to the organisation about those trends. And as you can see, as a result of actually monitoring the information and communicating messages to the business and going, hey, look, we think we can do better in this space, we've had a significant change in that space. So that's the pleasing outcome.
So are they like generalized warnings, or is that a specific, we noticed you spoke the speed limit on that time and that day kind of situation?
Yeah, we're not approaching this as a big stick, and that that we're going to individuals about their speeding. Look, if someone's turning up on the report frequently, then we might have to have a different conversation about that. But the objective is just being informed, having proactive information to change behaviour within the organisation, and that's the high level intent of sharing information like that. And as you can see, as a result of sharing it, you see a significant change in driver behaviour.
Thank you.
Adele.
And just through the chair, just to find on that, yes, we are receiving regular reports through the executive leadership team. So we're made, are aware of what's sort of happening out in the business. And as Darren pointed out, you can see in the graph on page 18, there has been a significant change in driver behaviour. Just before Christmas, in preparation for people going on holidays, we had our roading engineers talk to staff as well about the consequence of speed and the changes, even for example 5 to 10 k's and what that does to crash impacts and things like that. yeah, a lot of people walked away with a lot more information about, road safety from that discussion. So
Thank you
it's
for
good.
highlighting that, because it did seem that there was some sort of intervention in, September, October time, and that was as a general educative
Yeah.
process, was it?
And also, no, it is one of our key risks that we're wanting to monitor. So we then put the light on that one and started to do further work and reporting. And yeah, we're still getting weekly updates to ELT.
Right, thank you.
All right, so we have a recommendation that the People and Capability Managers Report dated 30th of March be received. Thank you, Councillor Sol, Councillor Coxhead. All those in favour? Against, carried. Thank you. Jonathan, page 24.
Good morning, everybody. Starting on a financial snapshot of the position of where we're at after the first 6 months of the financial year. So that's to the 31st of December, where 53% of our revenue has been received, 50% of our expenses expensed, and 27% of our capital program has been achieved to date. So that's on cash spend. In terms of total debt, we're sitting at 150 million against a revised budget number of 179. That provides an 86% debt to revenue ratio. And that 86% compares to our 200% benchmark limit. In regards to the capital expenditure, although the 27% appears to be low by the time we hit February, once we've come through that summer period, we've had a spend of 72 million. And forecasting to end the year at about 160 million, which is in line with budget, if not just over. Looking at a wee bit more detail in the financial performance area. So our rates revenue of 51.8 million so far is 1.1 million below the year-to-date budget. And this is mainly due to our watered meter charges being lower than what we'd forecast for December. In terms of reforecasting for the end of the year, we're expecting to land behind that budgeted number. So year to date so far, we sit on actual income of 2.2 million. We're forecasting an additional 2.6, which would land us around 4.8 million for the year. And that's against a budget of 6.7 million. This is predominantly around our forecasting of volumes, which we've talked about through the annual plan process. Year to date, we've invoiced out 1.8 million cubic metres, forecasting for an additional 2.1, which would land us on 3.9 million cubic metres against the original budget of 5.4. In comparison to the 2024 numbers, the 3.9 compares to 4.01, so very similar to the prior year in terms of volumes. Our subsidies and grants income are 10.9 million favourable, and that's due to spend being overhead on the NZTA program of works. Our fees and charges of 5.7 are again favourable to budget by $500,000, and that includes our regulatory fees and charges being 0.3 million favourable. Our interest revenue is 0.4 million favourable, and that's due to having surplus cash on hand through that period, partly due to a later rate strike. We had more cash in the bank for a longer period of time, as well as actively managing that cash to make sure we're taking advantage of the interest rates. Our other revenue is also favourable, 1.1 million, and that's just to do with timing of vested assets as they come into council. On the expenditure side, our total expenditure is closely tracking to budget. We do have some ups and downs in that space, with transport being ahead of budget by 1.85 million. So having spent more at this time compared to budget, but that's offset by some additional levels of service, 1.2 million. Also some bad debts of 0.7 million being favourable, and timing of payments to the District Drainage Society. again, just recapping on the capital expenditure piece. So although the year-to-date achieved is only in the 27%, which feels light given 50% of the year is passed, we're at 78% of what was planned for that time period. And as we hit through that summer period, we've typically caught that up and still on track to achieve the full year's plan. Touching on the Treasury report towards the end of the finance report. As I mentioned, our borrowings at 150 million at this point in time, with the cost of funds, including margin, of 4.63%. That's down from 5.5% this time last year. So we've seen the benefit of the declining interest rates feed through to council. The average term of our debt is 2.7 years. And you will note that we do have 2 breaches in our interest rate risk limits. The first breach in the 0 to 2 year ranges from 0.8 million to 8 million. And that's been corrected in February with some fixed rate loans being taken. And again, in the 2 to 5 year bracket, we have a breach, which by the end of the 5 year period is up to $36 million. The advice we've been discussing with Bancorp in that space is to start targeting interest rates under 3.5%. And as those rates come off, looking to lock in further debt. Part of that picture as well is understanding as we get more certainty around what's happening in the Three Waters space and as we start to materialise the projects in the long-term plan. So as that debt starts to become more certain, then we can look to lock in more hedging in that space as well. The final page or attachment to the report is our solution tracking. So that's against the 23-24 rates funded deficit of 4.2 million. So that was loan funded at the end of 24. Tracking towards that at this stage is 2.9 million of savings or solution in the 4 categories that we've identified there. A capitalisation of staff project time, which is 400,000. So that's capitalisation of rates funded staff in that space. So there's further capitalisations that occur, but these are for staff who are typically rates funded. We've got in-house transport savings of $1 million. Bad debt write-off savings, meaning we've had less bad debts written off in that space than was budgeted for, of 700,000, and interest rate reductions with the, again, the benefit of interest rates being lower and also borrowings being lower year to date as well. Happy to take any questions.
Were you going to point out the error in that table?
Yes, thank you. So in that solution tracking table, column 2, the achieved Q2, the total at the bottom reads 1.1. It should read 1.5. All the other totals in there are correct.
Right, so the questions are, Rodney.
A couple of questions. Let's start with that table. Capitalisation of staff project time isn't really a saving, it's just a deferral really, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah. So in the past, we've typically left that in the P&L and not something that we've aligned with the project timing. So what we're doing now is aligning that with the benefit of the assets that are being generated by capitalising the staff time as well.
Right, okay. Yeah, but I don't think we can really count that as a saving because we're still going to pay it sometime. The second one was in the annual report, obviously we're a bit short on our subsidies because some of the benchmarks for the particularly the Mokoro structure plan works, the roundabout and that, we're behind. You've talked about the subsidies being up because we're now ahead of schedule, but we haven't really made up all that gap yet, have we?
At the end of December, we haven't, and Cedric might want to talk to this further, but we have the 10 to 12 million that was left behind, if you like, and that 24 has been part of the catch up that's happening at the moment.
Okay, so we are catching it up. We've been told it's a timing issue, so we just need to watch the timing.
Yeah, and the plan for the whole capital program is targeting 107% by the end of this financial year.
And on page 32 of the agenda or 4 of your report, you talk about, I mean, you explain water supply, wastewater revenue is also down by $1 million. So is that reflecting the same sort of issues, or what's caused the wastewater revenue to be down by $1 million? It's actually down by more than the water supply. And I don't know how we charge industry for such things. You know, is there a combined volumetric charge, or how does that actually work? So wastewater 9.5 million versus 10.5 basically. We're at 41% of budgeted full-year revenue.
Through the chair, I just note in the commentary on page 33, there is a comment about the subsidy income, and as a result of the income through the regular business part.
Fell off. And the other one is corporate services revenues down by $1 million. Is that also explained in the notes?
Yes, it is. It's on that same page as well.
So that's
part
rates
of that is-
penalties. Okay,
Part of that is rates penalties, income
Okay.
being lower by 400,000.
cool, thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Could you elaborate, please, on the in-house transport savings and also the bad debt write-off savings? How much do we have to write off in our debt, in the debt?
So firstly, on the in-house transport savings, so that's the benefits that we've seen by bringing that Westlink contract now in-house, so not paying Westlink for those services and the costs being lower through that space.
Is that the ultimate saving, or are there more savings to come?
That's the ultimate saving we've identified for this year. The bad debts write-off, so that's 700,000 year to date, so that's 700,000 lower than what was budgeted for the full financial year. So there should be still more to come in that space as we work hard. We've got a dedicated resource in that space now to, I guess, follow up any overdue debts on a quicker basis.
Tend to be with rates?
Rates is definitely our bigger area, but it is across the board.
Thank you. Next is Andy.
Just a couple of questions to clarify. Page 31, expenses unfavourable ratings discount. Can you just explain what that means?
Through the chair, so I can talk to that one. We currently offer a discount for the early payment of rates, and we have a budget for that of $400,000. What we've actually seen is a higher uptake in people paying early, and so that's why our budget has been unfavourable, because we've had a higher number pay early and receiving that 3% discount, which we hadn't allowed for.
Okay, I thought it might have been a credit rating, so that clarifies that one. Page 33, subsidy income of 3 million on Heron Crescent is an unbudgeted. Is that just a timing thing, or is this additional funds that we've received?
I can talk to that one through the chair. So we've, because of the actual project, we've got the capital project as well as the income, and because the two net off, there hasn't been a budget provision, but ultimately that the income will cover the cost of the capital project, and you'll see a comment in capital as well.
And the last one is just sort of a general question. Is there sort of anything you know of or suspect that may have a material effect on our end of year position at this point in time?
So at this point, we are working through very closely to monitor each activity and cost centre, just to make sure that there's no rates funded impact or other impacts in there. It's a big piece of work where our business partners are getting deeper into the detail with the business. So improving finances knowledge and the business's knowledge, but it is something we're very closely monitoring.
So there's nothing at this point that you're sort of concerned about?
And nothing that we haven't raised already.
I just one further comment to that. We did highlight it in the first part of Jonathan's presentation that the variance in our water revenue will be down compared to budget. It is ring fenced inside the water activity. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that that's our key variance at this point in time.
Councillor Coxhead.
I have a very simple question for you, Jonathan. Page 39 under counterparty limits. Just the balances, the actual balances, credit or debit?
Sorry. So the counterparty limits that table in the bottom left, that's what you're referring to?
Yes, yes, the actual balances.
Yep, so a lot of those relate to our interest rate swaps as opposed to borrowings or drawdowns.
Sorry, so the debit,
So
the debit,
their use of those limits.
the use of them. So for example, ANZ 23 million overdrawn, right?
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
correct, yes.
Could we put that maybe in red or DR at the end when it's debit as opposed to credit?
Yes, and what we could do to make it a bit clearer as well is split out the actual borrowings to the interest rate swaps in that area as well. So it's more than just cash that we've drawn on those limits.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Just a simple question. On page 29, you've got the debt, total debt and net debt, but the sum doesn't add up properly. Is that an error or was that, I misunderstood something? So you got 150 million, less cash and cash equivalents of 31. That doesn't actually make net debt of 92.
Yeah, I will take that away and have a look and investigate that.
But so the graph on the right-hand side shows actual net debt of around 120. Obviously, it's a bar chart, it's hard to read exactly, but can we assume that that's about the right number?
Yes, correct. So there'll be
Okay, so we're
150.
looking, so almost certainly that's what 150 minus 31 is going to be the
That's
net
the
debt.
net,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Right. Councillor Thwaites.
Jonathan, just going back to the deficit last year and the tracking, you've identified there would be further. So I'm just trying to get to that 1.3 needed to pretty much square it away in this year we're underway. Is it likely that those interest rate reductions will follow through in the next 2 quarters as well?
We will still see some further gains in that interest rate space, but they may not be as high as what's been achieved so far.
Oh, yeah. So have you done some work on addressing is it likely that you will achieve the 4.2?
So we do have other items that we're working on beyond these 4 as well,
Yeah.
to aim as best as possible for that 4.2.
So they'll likely come back in the next meeting before we break.
Yeah, we certainly continue to report on this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, just one further thing then. On that volumetric water, if we are tracking very closely to last year, how did we get so far out of kilter with our budgeting, expecting a big increase when history showed us that it was 4 million cubes anyway, and we've achieved 3.9, but somehow we expected a massive jump. How did we get out of kilter there?
During our review process, we've looked at the dollars rather than the total volumetric. When we've referred back in the annual plan to the volumetric, we've found that the volumetric has been behind. Also, we had the complicating factor last year where the per cubic meter rate had changed. So we had the GST issue where our rate was only $1.24 versus $1.42. So that muddied the waters a wee bit as well.
So is all the meter reading and invoicing on time? Are you comparing apples with apples there, or there's no change happened in reading meters? Or
correct, there's no change in that space. And the second half of the year is best guess forecast.
Thank you.
Councillor Dowling.
Just wondering about the solid waste. We've got a favourable subsidy income. Is that because of anything we did in particular, or what? Why did we end up with a higher than planned subsidy in that activity? Page 33.
Yeah, so the subsidy income, noting your point, is 400,000 favourable. I'd have to get some further details to dive into that. I can come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
And Henderson.
Thanks. Just two.
Sorry, hang on a minute. I think
sorry.
we had an answer, I think, from Cedric on that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's just a accumulation of the waste levy that's coming through the quarterly payments.
Yep. Right, thank you.
Thanks. Just and in some respects, they follow on a bit from what you've been asking, Don. cutting to the first, which I'm really, really pleased to see, I have to say, the information coming through page 39, where we're getting some snapshots of what the debt forecast's looking like. That right-hand interest rate projection, you've followed through very nicely last night, and I don't know if other councillors have seen that chart has been updated to now actually include what the forward cost of funds, including margin, is looking like from council. Was that widely distributed? I think it's a really, really important chart because it cuts to a lot of your trying to get a visual feel for what could possibly contribute to a beneficial contribution to us dealing with the deficit. And my look at this, is there a possibility we could get that new chart put up for the script, up on the screen?
I can.
No.
I'm happy to send that around later. So the update,
okay,
to the graph
so
is.
let me explain. If you look on page, it's 11 of the Treasury report. It's page 39 of the, and you have a look at the chart that's currently saying cost of funds, including margin, market linked floating forecast, and then the weighted average. What we requested earlier this week and received, and it's a great chart. It's if you can put this chart that you sent last night on this going forward, it's going to be really helpful for us all. Because what I can assume from it,
I've put it in everybody's, I've circulated everybody's inbox.
In short, what I can assume from it is that our LTP is showing a total cost of funds on our debt are ranging between 5% and 5.5% roughly over the next 10 years. If we look at the market now, as per the market's forward rates, this is what the, and that's the, that is the yellow. In this one, it's going to be the yellow. It's indicating that, and also if I look at the forward swap rate, i.e. what could I lock down my current base cost of interest and then add my margin to, you're probably looking right now at a snapshot where you've got about a 1% saving to your LTP. Now, what is that in relative terms to your, if we're projecting net debt of 170 million at the end of this year, and that's going to increase, for every 100 million of debt, that's 1.7 million per annum. It's going to help your deficit. Now, we've heard from Adele, which is great, that Bancorp are talking about where we're going to push the button. And this is where you're going to push the button on that rate. And Adele's saying 3.5. At the moment, you've got forward curves that are showing somewhere between 3.5 and 4% ability. So it'll be really good to get some forward idea from Bancorp and from Adele's team that, hey, folks, this is what we could do right now. You could, I'm not saying you should, but you could lock and load that benefit to your LTP today, which would have an impact of, as I just said, something in the vicinity of 1.7 million as a contribution to the current deficit that you've been looking at. So I'm reading this right. I would say, Jonathan, and that's what that chart going forward is going to be able to allow you to look at, because you're going to be able to see where you are, where you look at what it's looking like, and it'll enable you to be able to ask Adele, what's our strategy and what's your strategy with Bancorp in order for us to mitigate that, because we don't want to see that benefit potentially erode in a volatile market. Yes, there's one thing we have got, we've got volatile markets. And I just firstly say that the changes that you've made have been fantastic. Everything I've asked in the past, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. With the inclusion of that, I think it's going to be a really good tool for this committee to be able to really step back and see the woods for the trees.
Thank you.
Following on from Stuart's point there, you did reference it, Stuart, that about the waters entities changing. You're virtually seeing signalling change that will benefit that water entity if one is created going forward, because that's where the bulk of the debt's going to sit. And so that benefit's really going to flow there, because our whole debt profile is going to be redrawn if things change dramatically. So I'm just trying to caution a little bit that don't go out and buy all the new cars just yet. That's all.
And that's not my, as you say, it's not my advice, because that's not where I'm coming from on this, because this is exactly right. You still don't know how things are going to be split. You don't know whether you're going to have a CCO. You don't know whether you're going to be doing it on your own. These things are forward looking, but that doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't be considering decisions, because those decisions will go push in a sense. If you were to do swaps today on what you know, which is what your debt is, and you're making those proper judgment calls in relation to those debt forecasts, by the time the, excuse the pun, it comes out of the rinse in terms of water, they will be all transitioned across at value. Okay, that's the whole basis of how it can only work that way. So you do need to think of your decision making for the here and now, not anticipating in some cases what's going to get structured in terms of where that debt is going to sit, because there will be with others as well. There will be the pooling of these and equalizations, I guess is the best way to call it. So I think it's worth looking at and asking the questions, especially, you know, you've got a Treasury advisor, and that's good. These are the hard questions that we want to know the answer. We want to get their views on and answers to.
Councillor Daly.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was a bit slow to process, but Cedric, your answer, accumulation of waste levy coming through. I know it's not a huge amount, but is this something that should have come through in the previous financial year, and it's sort of affecting the position that we had in the last financial year?
I'm not sure. I'll have to get the detail from it.
Just because we took so much grief on the you know the hole that we supposedly had, but we're seeing now that these subsidies are coming through in this financial year to balance the situation.
Yep, I understand. I think my understanding is the waste levy is ring fenced for solid waste, so it stays within that activity.
Councillor Joyce. Just a thought on the interest rate track. I guess it depends on, and this is where Bancorp is more qualified than I am for sure, is whether you think the market is yet reflecting the likely future direction of rates. And you know, the risks of locking in is that, you know, if the track proves to be lower, then you have to mark the market as actually detrimental in the future rather than beneficial. But that's also about reading the tea leaves and where the market's going. I would say it's not my job, because I was a financial journalist and I'm particularly bad at investing. As people used to say to me, what's the dollar going to do? And I'd say, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't have to work as a journalist. I did notice also in the email talking about the split out of Water's debt, and I accept there are limitations, but as we get closer and closer to decision-making time, it would be useful to have that tracked in this report as well, because as Don has pointed out, it is the vast majority of our debt. So, you know, in terms of, in terms of the Water's decisions, we're looking at it as per the program, but there's also the life beyond Water's look, right, that we should be starting to focus on as well. And I know some work's been done in the background, but I think it would be really good if this committee was briefed on what the debt profile looks like once Waters is separated out. Bearing in mind we have to separate it out, it's just a matter of how.
Councillor Cox.
Well, to ask Stuart just to clarify his comment about the mark-to-market stuff for the loan, like the swaps. Can I just get him to clarify something? Is that allowed?
On the agenda.
Yep. So just what you were talking about before, Stuart, and this is my understanding and maybe for the benefit of others too. So let's say the swaps rate is 5% at the time that the debt transfers over, market rates prevailing are 3%, just let's keep it simple. So what you're saying is mark to market, there's actually a cost to that. So that makes the debt, well, the debt costs higher. So that gets added to the amount transferred in a mark to market situation. Is that correct?
Well, we won't know what the rules are, will we?
Well, no, this is what Stuart was talking about.
If you go right back to the very, very beginning of Three Waters and Shift and Change, and that was that every council in the country's got a completely different profile, different approach to their interest rate risk management. They will have been making decisions as they should have been making in relation to their profile, and they would have swaps that they were engaging in active risk management of their risk profiles as per their policies. And some were going to be split ultimately for water in order to determine what that ledger looked like. That hasn't changed. Now, if you look at the options that are going to be in front of you, and you've got quite limited options because you're not big enough to probably do something on your own, potentially on your own efficiently, but there's going to be a separation, but you're still owning the assets. If let's say you were to go to a CCO that was 3 or 4 councils all putting water into in order to create an efficient structure that is from a governance perspective is going to provide the services, and you're going to have your water. Let's say there's an equalisation in relation to those councils as to what debt is going to go into that and at what rate, because it will be where they've been. It has to follow suit, and that will be part of your negotiation with those councils that will be joining that CCO. If you were to do it on your own, well,
I think we're getting a bit off the topic here. Yeah, I think we get.
But what I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying is that equalisation is about whatever that is in terms of mark to market. It has to, because it's otherwise there is no equalisation. So to your point, I would be absolutely gobsmacked if you're going to sit on doing derivative transactions that you cannot apply to any debt because you've passed the debt on at floating rate, for example. That will not be part of the equation under any option, in my opinion.
So move along.
Sorry about the long answer.
All right. I think that's exhausted the questions. So we have a call for a mover and a seconder for the Chief Financial Officer's report dated 30th of March to be received. Councillor Joyce, Councillor Coxhead, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Jonathan. And I think we've got You're signing there, right? Okay, Peter's way sick. So we'll move on to page 41.
So just introducing the report to council on the Western Bay of Plenty's long-term plan from the auditors. So this is just a follow-up report that council receives every year to provide a wee bit more feedback and information to council on management. Just touching on a few of the points that are in there. So this report was received on the 28th of 11th, post the adoption of the long-term plan on the 26th of September. Points raised include the NZTA funding piece, which they commented a lot on during their audit process, and that Leon commented on during the adoption meeting. Also our inflation assumptions, improvement opportunities for our asset management plans. And then there's also a note in there regarding the local waters done well piece, and more of a highlight to management in terms of the timeframes that we need to meet in that space. I'll take the report as read if there's any questions or comments.
Doesn't seem to be. That's good. All right. So we need to receive that report from the Audit Risk and Assurance Manager's report. Councillor Joyce, Councillor Sol, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So you're staying in the chair, Jonathan, for page 60.
Through the chair, I'll ask Darren to come and speak to this.
This one might be a bit long. Do we want to take a quick break before we get into this one? All right, 5-minute break. Back. I'll make it 7. Back at 25 too. we've got enough to carry on. I think I'll move on, Darren. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just subbing in on behalf of Peter today, who's not well. So we'll kick off there. The key focus in the risk assurance space over the last quarter was a continued review of the council strategic
Can you move
risks.
the mic a bit closer? Move the mic a bit closer.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So the key activities in the risk and assurance space over the previous quarter was the continued focus on council strategic risks. They've been reviewed and refreshed. We've re-implemented the weekly cadence at ELT in terms of the review of each of those strategic risks. So that was a significant part of last quarter's activity. And also the other key focus was the internal audit work plan, which has been presented in this space. So some of the emerging risks within the area, or the key focus for the executive leadership team, you can see that we've commented on a few areas that have been our focus over that period in terms of central government reform, the representation review, and the introduction of new infrastructure funding tools. Those are the kinds of things which are coming out over that quarter, which were a focus for the executive leadership team and the organisation as they review those strategic risks. So I'll take the report as read at this point in time. Is there any questions?
You have a question?
Yep. Just in terms of looking forward, and it's always difficult because that's looking forward's always having to make some assumptions, and we've got three things in my head that are potential things to shift the dial on the enterprise risk register and materiality and that whole aspect. I think for sure the transition to a 3 water situation is definitely going to be one, and that's what I would imagine on a quarterly basis. You'll be looking closely at this in order to see emerging trends. When it comes to looking at dialing back to the internal audit and internal audit work, the selection of the deep dives that you're considering, are you looking at as a guide to that, the Audit New Zealand report to management on the 24 annual report, together with their report that you showed this today in relation to the LTP, in terms of their priorities around and comments? Is that having any sway in the selection of your internal audit deep dive program?
Get Adele to answer that one.
Through the chair. So yes, we do take that on board. That's why we do a review each year in terms of what that work program's looking like, even though it's a 3-year sort of cycle. So as things change and we do get the feedback. So, you know, this year we've obviously got the focus on the building consents. Yeah. And so that's why that one's up early. And also, you know, with our revenue and just the general process around that. The payroll one as well is one that we know needs to be undertaken on a regular basis to ensure that, you know, that we are capturing that. The rules do keep changing in that regard. So yes, we do take on board the feedback, but there's nothing that we felt that needed to be brought forward as a result of the LTP management feedback.
And I know it's premature because you haven't done I don't think you've done a management response. Well, have you received the Audit New Zealand report to management on the 24 annual report?
Through the chair, so we've just received the annual report for 23-24 letter from Audit. We're still in the process of responding to that, so it hasn't been completed as yet.
And I take it that will be coming to this committee at the next committee meeting?
That's correct.
Great. And So it's really that's going to have a snapshot of what they consider to be, levels of materiality, comments in relation to what their recommendations are. And this is going to update in relation to that.
Through the chair, so yes, we'll take on board any of the recommendations and work through whether or not there's any changes to the audit work program. If there's a change to the audit work program, then we'll bring that through for approval.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adele.
Otherwise, if there's no change, we hold on for a year. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Right. Any other questions on the changes that have been made to the risk register statements that we've got in front of us? No? Well, you've obviously done a great job. All right. So we need a mover and a seconder for the Risk and Assurance Manager's report. Which one are we up to? Second one, yes. Risk and Assurance Report, 13th of March, to be received. Thank you, Councillor Ray, Councillor Sol. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. All right, on to page 107. Darren staying in the chair.
I'll stay in the chair for this one as well. So you can see that the Audit and Risk Finance Committee work program for 2025 is in line with the terms of reference to the Audit and Risk program. There's the proposed program for the next year. Again, I'll just take that as read. Is there any questions around the program?
Through the chair, or additionally, if there's any other reports that council wishes for us to bring to this committee, we can also do so.
Work programs clearly set out, so we know what's coming the lift. So have you got any issues with that one? All right, excellent. So we need a mover and a seconder for the Risk Assurance Manager report on the WIC program. Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. Excellent. Well, going well, people. We're going very well. On to page 110.
Through the chair, Cedric, I'm just thinking this is the technical report from NZTA. You may wish to talk to this.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll take this one as read and hopefully I can answer some questions on this one.
Councillor Joyce.
One concern that NZTA have is the road safety, and even saying that some of the safe system audits were incomplete and missing significant components. So are we as focused on our rural roads of keeping particularly motorcyclists safe? Because that's an area of concern that NZTA has raised. Page 125 of the agenda, page 14 of the audit.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So obviously a big change for us is obviously we've brought the team in-house and we have a dedicated road safety engineer, obviously Ashley, which he's now moved on, but we've got a replacement for him. Mm-hmm. So part of obviously the benefits of having the service now in-house is that our ability to respond to crashes when they do happen, our CAS reports, and then how we follow that up, it means we have a lot more control. It also gives us the ability now to action the work. So a lot of what Callum spoke about at the PNM workshop was around response times and level of service. So obviously one of those significant ones will be that when there is a CAS crash, you send out your safety engineer, you put it on a program, you address it, you do a safety report, and then you close that loop. So I think by bringing that in-house now, we've got total ownership rather than under the Westlink contract that was all subbed out via their team. Right.
Also road factors, yeah. when road factors is us, basically, isn't it? As opposed to driver error or anything else.
Councillor Valley.
Cedric, just on network condition and management on page 110, it says 2 key risk areas identified requiring improvement. These were identified. The audit, that's an internal audit, isn't it? Not a thing. Oh. Who conducted the audit? That's an internal audit.
No.
Through Mr. Chair, so that was conducted with staff and NZTA. So they have an audit team that go around the country auditing RCAs with the council teams.
So you did field visits with NZTA reps to go and look at the condition of the network?
Yep, correct. So effectively they, if you look at that ONRC classification, they take a sample audit on each of the classifications of road, and then they go and have a look at them, and they look at drainage, stormwater, assets, and then they'll look at our RAM system around our pavement deterioration, maintenance, and then I guess they benchmark us against the rest of the country or similar councils of similar size.
So would you say on that point 1 about stormwater drainage, that's a sort of a nationwide issue that they're sort of focusing on, or it's not something particular to us?
So definitely stormwater drainage is always an issue. I would say is throughout the country. One of the challenges with stormwater is that it's a low value activity, meaning the contractors don't generally make a lot of money out of that. Cleaning water tables high shoulder. So when you have a lump sum contract, and obviously what's the Westlink contract, you're less inclined to actually do that sort of work. You want to focus on your key KPI parameters. The challenge is that the stormwater underpins your pavement maintenance or the integrity of your pavements. So obviously you want to keep your drains as clean as possible. So for us, we definitely know that's an issue. So we had 2 students over the summer period who have inspected all our culverts across the district, the ones that have been blocked, the inlets and the outlets, and we have a robust program now that we're slowly getting through. So some of that is flushing, just clearing the inlets and outlets, but it's definitely an issue. So part of that is how you manage that is actually you write the contract in such a way that promotes the need to actually focus on stormwater drainage. So what I mean by that is you measure that as a performance measure and make sure that the road generally complies 80% of the time and the assets are free flowing.
No, I mean, and obviously we talked about this in our workshop the other day, but I think it's a welcome change that we're focusing a bit more on that now.
Councillor Murray-Bench.
Suggestions on page, what is it? 115. Cedric, consider where possible the introduction of more comprehensive speed limit reductions in rural areas to meet identified risk on these roads. We've had a few requests already, and they just sort of seem to be hanging in the air. But on the rest, that's in Te Puna, but on the rest of the roading rural network, do you take a look at the speed limits from people's accidents or from subject to requests from local people? How will you do that assessment as to whether there needs to be a change? Because on the whole, we're all a bit touchy about speed limits.
So generally, in a perfect world, you design a road, you build a road, and then that road is shaped, or the geometrics determines the speed. So there's a big process that you go through, measuring the curves, and that'll determine whether it's a 65, 100, or an 80. Generally, in the past, as you know, we've made blanket sort of speed limits for rural as being 100 as a maximum, so not to try and push that. Generally, a lot of that is driven by if there are accidents, or we're looking at CAS data, or if we have problematic areas where we do have a lot of near misses or complaints come up, we generally investigate those, send out the safety engineers, and they have a look at it and they determine whether the speed threshold should be changed. There's probably some work to do around when we do identify speed limit changes, how we come back to the community or council on how we go about that. That's probably a work in progress. But a lot of it in terms of how we also are looking at it, in terms of part of the new model is we've got 3 network inspectors in-house. So not only does that enable us to control the maintenance program, i.e. Planning to do stormwater, it means we're also constantly on the network looking at these areas where you might see constant skids on roads, or you might see where site barriers are constantly hit. So then basically it's just a continuous program of improvement for whether you look at that or not. But then again, speed is only one thing. It could be you should be looking at it from a journey perspective. So you might look at it from 2 kilometers back or 2 kilometers forward. Should we be putting safety barriers up? Is that the first thing? Should we be putting different types of edge marker posts or reflective paint? So it's all looked at in terms of a safe system approach.
If I may, sir, with your relationship with NZTA, take, for example, the roading network safety measures that the last government did on from Waihi through to Mokoroa, and spent a lot of money doing it. Where they made some overcorrections, what relationship do you have with NZTA to encourage them to actually make changes?
So we have in my view, we have a good relationship with NZTA, especially with the maintenance operations team. We do generally meet with them and Tauranga City and talk about all things from journey management, from coordination of traffic management, where they're doing their capital programs. But from a upgrade or those barriers, we have very little input into that work. That generally is driven by NZTA and the NOC contract or their maintenance contract or their safety engineering team. Although we'll hear about it, it's more of a, we're letting you know more, what do you think? And that's, to be fair, probably how it's ever been since I've been in the industry. But we do have a point where we do raise things, i.e. Katikati is always a good talking point in terms of the main street. So we're always advocating the community boards requests that they put forward and very pushing hard on the maintenance, noting our prominent areas. But because we don't maintain that network, we don't actually have right to work on their network, it is a challenging place to be in.
I did find it rather curious, that statement, considering every time we try and do something about a speed limit, they change the rules and stop us from doing that. So, Councillor Todd.
Thank you, sir. I basically just, in some ways, it may have been covered at P&M workshop the other day, but I unfortunately couldn't be here. The recommendations through this audit about seal extension, and from what I could see from the agenda the other day, we were relatively continuing along the seal extension program, but they're suggesting that we should be reprioritising that money towards safety issues, etc., that we have. I don't know where we're sitting with that. That's all. As I say, it may have been discussed the other day, but I did miss that. That was one question. So the question is, are we continuing with our seal extension, or are we going to put that on hold and start dealing with some of these other issues that the auditors have identified?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So seal extensions don't attract subsidy. So from my perspective, it's thank you for the recommendation, but the elected members have given clear direction in terms of how they want to approach seal extensions. So we have a list and a prioritisation and budget in the RTP. So we'll continue to deliver that as long as the elected members continue to approve through the LTP. Yep. I guess the point they're making there is saying you could be spending your money on other activities, because often they make the comparison saying that seal extensions often have 4 or 5 people down that length, but you're investing a significant amount of money on the roading network when it's for the minority. So, but this is no different to any other district that who have seal extension programs.
And the other one is that the comments from the safe system audit. And we had issues, obviously, and we've obviously acknowledged it, because you know, we say some improvement needed, and there's some detail further on or comment further on. But it does concern me that there seems to have been, from internally and externally, procedures were really incompleted. And are you confident that we've got a handle on that one now? Because they referred to it as being, you know, a lot of stuff wasn't completed as far as the paperwork is concerned, the reports on it.
Yep, yes, I acknowledge that. I think that's a fair comment. So we have addressed that, and we have got more process, a lot with our data collection as well. but we are slowly developing end-to-end processes for that. I think what it really relies on is more of a program of improvement. So a lot of what we have been doing is, since we've brought it back in-house, noting we brought it back in-house over a 10-day period, slowly looking at step changes over sort of like a 3-year period is kind of how we're looking at it. So first one is actually just starting getting teams out there doing the maintenance work was the first point, and making sure that we can respond to an emergency event like we had 2 years ago. Obviously, the main priority was obviously locking in the safety engineer and the support from Becca if obviously we had further more than we could keep up with. And then we obviously be doing modelling around our capital programs to make sure we're investing in the right spaces. And what I mean by that is under the lump sum or the previous Westlink contract, there were particular performance measures that would drive the outcome of the programs, along with safety intervention as well. So what we've now got now is more of a program that is completely controlled by council. So the investment profile is a lot different because it's not being driven by a performance-based contract. So what that means is that we now have, like I said, those 3 dedicated network inspectors. We have the dedicated safety teams that are looking at that and managing those processes. And probably another key difference too is 2 or 3, I think, of the team have gone on the new safe systems training as well. So we effectively have 3 qualified people within the team as well, or 2, sorry, 1 to go.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
I'm not sure we can answer this today, but as I understand it, we manage our speeds through the bylaw, and that's a very clunky process. I think last time we discussed that, we were advised that we did do it in a different way previously, and we were found to be ultra vires in that, but other councils seem to manage it. So, yeah, is there still, and I realise the Deputy CEO is probably more her area, so perhaps it's not a question for answer today, but are we still working on a way that we don't end up setting speed limits every 3 years or 5 years when we review the bylaw, rather than actually being responsive to need and being able to do it, not every day, but a little bit more often than that? I'm just wondering if perhaps that question could be taken. It's more a bylaw question. I don't know, Cedric, if you're qualified to answer it or not, but if you can, that's good. If not, if it could be come back to us later.
Yep. Through Mr. Chair, so I don't have the full detail, but conversations that Carl and I have, if we're trying to develop a process that we're going to recommend that we do it 6 monthly. So we gather them all up, the ones that we need, and then we draft that report to NZTA and go through the speed limit rule and then submit that 6 monthly is our view. But there's still a lot of work to go into that to actually find out how we go about that.
Councillor Daly.
Cedric, sorry, another question, but you're so good at answering these questions that just got to take the opportunity. It's on the suggestions and suggestion 5.4 and 5.5. Just some personal experiences on both these issues, but a recent pavement rehabilitation at Pingaroa, there was a particular resident who had a concrete driveway going up to the edge of the old road, and then when the road was fixed, he sort of indicated that he wouldn't mind a like-for-like replacement, but in the end he agreed with what the contractor was doing with everyone else. But when it came to actually doing the job, it was a substandard job, and it ended up being, instead of a nice solid chip seal surface, it was actually a really loose gravel surface, and exactly this condition that's talked about here, where the gravel gets sprinkled onto the pavement and end up with an unsafe situation. So I'm really just maybe asking, are you aware of the driveway mitigations and or fixes to ensure that this doesn't happen? I think you can probably answer that pretty easily by just saying yes, but
yeah, so I don't know the specifics of that one, but the utility code of practice effectively has the like for like, and generally best practices, if you are doing rehabs, rehabilitations or new pavements, that you do generally seal back to the boundary. So in that case, it should have been put back to concrete, or it should have, if it was asphalt, it should be put back to what that was. That's generally best practice.
And the second question on the last one, undertake targeted skid resistance testing for high-risk rural roads on wet or slippery roads, or defective roads due to bleeding or flushing. I brought this up before, but I've had 2 incidences on my road in the last 6 weeks where cars have lost control, done 360s on wet roads. One of them could have resulted in 2 fatalities quite easily, just pure luck that it didn't. And the other one, the car went into a bank and then flipped around and was abandoned basically. But just wondering if you can, and I think I mentioned the road inspector just having to come past the road when I was waiting with my grandson for the bus. But, you know, I went and had a word with them and pointed out the point where this car lost control and did a 360, and he had missed it completely. He hadn't even noticed that it was not only bleeding, flushing, it was also a shove up on the edge of the road. So I'm just interested in the comment about targeted skid resistance testing. Are we planning to actually do that or carry out some sort of skid resistance testing?
Yep, through Mr. Chair. So we do high-speed data every year. So probably what this comment is saying that because of the changeover from the previous contractors, we just probably didn't get around to doing this year's or the previous year's testing. So every other year under the Western contract, there'll be a portion of the network that we go through scrim testing in terms of the macro and micro textures of the road. So effectively, this is probably a fair comment to say that we didn't do any of the specific testing in the last 12 months. But generally, it's normal practice that you'd identify half a dozen sites and then you would send out the scrim test when they come along. So we will be doing it in subsequent years as they come along.
Is that a special vehicle that does that?
Yep. So if you've ever seen it before, it's basically a 2-axle truck, and then it's got a wheel behind it, and then it also sprays water, and then you'll see that it slowly slams on and drags, and then it's measured. That's how they effectively do it.
And I guess just as a recommendation, that the road inspectors, I'm not sure why something as obvious as what I pointed out was missed, but I don't know if there's any procedure to try and, if there's any special training for these guys. The guy that was doing it was a fairly young guy, new employee. So just wondering if the level of experience is there when we're doing these road inspections.
Yep, feeling pretty confident about our 3 inspectors. They'll always have different strengths in terms of how they go about their network inspections and how they pick up faults into the network. The team have been doing specific training on consistency, because obviously you want 3 inspectors to be marking out the same thing, so you consistency across the network, particularly if they're going to look at it probably from a ward approach, so you have an inspector in each ward. So there has been ongoing training, so it's just probably a continuous improvement exercise.
Councillor Henry.
Okay. I'm really pleased with this report, as you must be, Cedric. And I see that the assessment team are very confident with it being in-house, as we all should be, I believe, too. So congratulations to that. I have been very pleased with the repairs that I have seen, and I've discussed that with you, that there had been some road seal upturn for some other activity that was going on in the street, and the seal replacement was horrendously terrible, and our councils had to go back and repair that. So all those repairs have been amazing. So I've got questions around, I'm not sure what the business case is. And I see that they've mentioned in this, and can you explain that? And if it's not successful, they're encouraging us to hurry on with the rehabilitation work with urgency. So that's one question. And also a question around the rural roads extension that happened under the Tauranga City Board, Roading Board, where they're not to code. And those roads are increasingly becoming more and more dangerous as activities to do with the horticulture and industry are using them, and more little subdivisions or housing lots are coming up on that. So the traffic, and Lindeman Road, you know about, because we've been up there together. that's got some really dangerous corners on it. And the other thing I've talked about with you before, and people do not understand, and as I didn't understand, that any breakage and seal as you're turning into these rural roads is the responsibility of NZTA, and they're not coming to do the job. I know you've alerted them. So how do we sort of communicate that or make that known to our public, because they think it's to do with us?
Through Mr. Chair, so that's always been an ongoing challenge when I've worked at previous councils as well. Obviously, under the boundaries in the MOU, where on the state highway where you are having those sharp turns or you have patches right on the adjacent next to the state highway, it is effectively for the NOC contractor to come out and repair those. They obviously are under a performance-based spec as well. So although I'd encourage people to raise SRs to NZTA, what we have been doing, I know Cullen has been taking some of those snips and then send them to the senior network manager for NZTA. But again, it's one of those ones where we can keep notifying them, but it's up to them in terms of when they repair it. But it is frustrating, and I acknowledge that it's hard for the general public to differentiate the state highway and the local road. Probably to answer to your other question around obviously some of our current rural roads versus our subdivided roads or our latest roads, there's always going to be that issue of time where you've got new subdivisions coming on. The development code obviously improves. I always use the example of street lighting. So if you look at a lot of new subdivisions now, the street lighting, the spacing is probably 26, 27 meters between lights, and the lighting compared to older areas, the light spacing is 150 meters. You see a lot of that throughout where you've got older subdivisions, their curbing, their footpaths. The challenge is that although we could go out there and we could identify all these roads and then we could overlay them against the latest requirements of the development code, the cost to bring that up to that standard won't attract subsidy, but it's also would be a significant cost to put into the LTP. So it's also, although it's something, and I don't believe we at this current point have a minimum requirement, and what I mean by that is that we don't have a blanket rule that every urban road has a footpath at least on one side or curb and channel, or that it's definitely something that we could workshop, we could look at a later date. So it's easy to pick up the data is what I'm saying, but it's not easy to fund it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the business case and the independent person that you've got to do the assessment? It's under general in that report. They talk about the independent person. Is where does that person come from? What's their? I mean, they're obviously roading, but where have you sourced that person, or have you not sourced them yet?
I'll have to come back to you on that one, Anne. I'm not quite sure what that's referring to.
So,
yeah.
When you're going out and see, well, you obviously haven't put it in place yet.
No, I'm not sorry, and I'm not quite sure what that's in reference to.
Okay, I'll just.
I'll take that one offline with you.
Okay, we'll leave it. We'll get back to it later. Thank you.
Councillor Sultan.
Thank you, sir. Very briefly, and thanks again also. The roading has improved for us heaps. So that's just a comment. The other one that interests me, and I did see it, that we were in the workshop papers, was about pavement markings, etc. And we're not particularly interested in doing them. I am interested as to whether that is a solid, hard, fast rule. I've had a number of people now, and I mean a number, in Waihi Beach asking me about marking the road with the speed limit going into the built-up area because they find difficulties or people do not really see the signage. So I'm sort of picking up on that and trying to probably pick up information elsewhere. Are you flexible? That's the question.
So the answer is yes, we are flexible in terms of that. So effectively the marking is determined by the TCD manual. which I think is traffic control devices. And basically at a very high level, it has a volume of traffic depending on whether you have a center line or you have an edge line or whether you have cat's eyes, or depending on what you actually have on there. So the idea is that some don't have, some have some, is to develop consistency across the country. So if you are going into a rural area where you say there's only 15 vehicles per day, then you know that it generally won't have any markings whatsoever. So that then the idea is that the driver is understands the situation that they're in, or that setting, that it's probably 100-kilometre road, and they need to be more aware. So really it's a consistency thing. But where we do have issues where you might have the geometry might not quite be right, or the horizontal or vertical geometry, you might actually put a centre line over the rise, just because the sight distance is poor. So there is that level of flexibility, but generally the roads are purely just designed based on the TCD manual and the traffic volume.
Councillor Murray-Benj.
Cedric, you introduced a really good system when we brought roading back inside, and you've got someone who actually contacts the person who's made the complaint, and then that person tells the resident as to when the work is going to be done. And when it doesn't happen, it sort of creates a sort of a loss of faith from the person who made the first call. And it's such a good system you've got going. So have you developed a program whereby there's a link back to the person who made the original call and the council contact to make sure that they're updated as to when work will be done, if there's any change in the dates that have been given to them?
I'll have to go back to the team just to give you the right answer, but I'll come back to you on that. But how it is set up is that we do, obviously the SR does come in, like you said, we give them a call. Generally one of the inspectors will identify it. If it fits within our level of service or our intervention strategy, then it'll be programmed. So something that we'll be covering off in the next workshop is response times, and meaning that, so generally if it's an arterial or busy road, then that should happen within the month, or next month. If it's a safety issue, it happens obviously within the month. But some of our low volume access roads, it might be that it doesn't happen for 3 months. So the team do try their best to, when it does go into a program, they ring them back and say, hey, that is programmed for month 3 or month 2 or month 1. I'll have to go back, but I'm fairly confident in most cases, DICE team do call back if it's not going to happen. But if it is going to happen, or it's just a couple of days late, I suspect they probably wouldn't call back. It's only if it's going to be pushed further than a month, but if there's a week here or there, because often a lot of the times it happens a lot earlier than what they've told them.
Well, in 1 or 2 cases, that hasn't been the case, and people lose faith in our systems if there's confusion about the dates that something's going to be done and it doesn't happen, and they think they've been forgotten and it's been pushed off the list. So if you could just check that for us, it would be really good. Right,
that's all the questions we have. So we need the monitoring and investment audit report to be received. Councillor Sol, Councillor Murray-Benj, all those in favour? Oh, yes, certainly can, sir.
We remain concerned that that money will still be other road issues. So
you want to comment on that?
I don't really have a comment on that, but I agree. I agree. So yeah. So we
what I'm saying is we would be obliged, if we want to stop the ceiling program, that's fair enough. But we can't charge that rate and use that money somewhere else without going through a process to approve that.
Well, I think the argument on that is that where it doesn't quite make sense is that we wouldn't get subsidy on that. So why would we do it? Yeah.
All right. Yes. Thank you. So kind. So we have a move and a seconder. All those in favour? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right. We're doing well, people. So we now need a resolution to exclude the public so we can go into confidential and have some good news from Alison.